Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen from Databricks. Today we have Graham Heimbach. I'm a business development part of partner engineering, and I have the pleasure of introducing Mark Geisler, ex-IBM mainframe extraordinaire, knows all the details. Hey, Mark, thanks for joining me today.
Great to be working with you, Graham.
Cool, thank you, Mark. Mark's going to add color commentary, so the goal today is to walk you through using Attunity on the mainframe, specifically DB2 ZOS, and then Mark will add some other color commentary on the other technologies we support on the mainframe, and of course load that data, do full load, and change data capture from the source mainframe to Azure Databricks. So we're going to walk you through that. We've got our Databricks environment already set up. If I click on the data element over here, we can see I've got a database called Mainframe, and there are no tables in it. Over to Attunity Replicate. I have a task partially built, so I'm going to double click on this task to go into task configuration. As you can see, I've got a source and target already defined, so let's take a look at this source definition, shall we? Just a simple double click on it. So I've got my my server name, which is an IP address, or it gets resolved to an IP address, a port, a location. Mark, it says Dallas B. What does that mean on the mainframe?
So in DB2 terms, what a location is basically, it defines kind of a database at the DB2 level. It's actually logical. It's nothing physical. But when we connect into the mainframe via the distributed data facility interface, it requires us to say what database, what location are we connecting to. So it's basically a DB2 subsystem that we're connecting to, and that's the alias name for it.
So I could set up multiple source endpoints, if you will, to different subsystems on the mainframe.
For different DB2 subsystems. Now, for Replicate, we have a very lightweight install on the mainframe. Okay. We put it what we call Replicate for Z on the mainframe, and basically it allows the Replicate source capture to interact with the mainframe system, read data for full load, and then for changes, we actually run the IFI interface, the IFKID 306 API that IBM supports that allows us to read log records for the tables that we care about.
Cool, awesome.
Very straightforward, lightweight.
Excellent. And then under advanced, I noticed I can say how often I want to check for CDC records, and then also this UDTF name. What's right. That specifically pointing to on the mainframe?
So the way that we it's actually a really cool interface in that the way that we access the IFI, we're actually doing it through what we call a user-defined table function. So it looks like a table from Replicate's perspective, and we're just selecting against it, but it calls out to an external module that runs those IFI calls, because they have to execute on the mainframe. We can't run IFI from Replicate. It actually has to run on the mainframe to access those log records. So that's what the UDTF, it's kind of our way of interfacing to the IFI. And then within that code, we actually pull up the log records that meet the tables, that match the tables that we're replicating, and then into a result set, and then that, we can define the size of the result set, the max size of the result set that we're going to bring down from the mainframe.
Cool, awesome. That's excellent. I'm going to go general, and then of course I've got a user ID and password and the driver we're using, so I can say test connection. This mainframe is behind the Attunity firewall, so I'm also VPN'd virtual private network into our network, so that's how I can get access to it. So it said it's successful. That's good news. And then of course I've got my Azure Databricks pointing to that mainframe database endpoint. I've got my description, of course. I've got my Azure storage, my access key, and then my container name that I'm going to write to, and then of course a target folder. We're going to call it mainframe. And then I've got my my Databricks connectivity thread. So we are our HTTP path, the database name that we're going to write to as well on the man point. So we'll write the metadata up into Azure Databricks, and then we're going to use Azure Storage underneath it to actually store that data, and then use a mount point within inside of Databricks to mount that storage, so we can do table interaction. So I'm going to show you all of that during the demo. So also test connection, make sure that we're able to get to our Azure Databricks environment. It is up and running. Excellent news, that's all working. Perfect. So as part of building a task in Replicate, pretty simple, I'm going to say table selection. It's going to connect to the mainframe using that endpoint connection that we just defined in the mainframe. I have a whole bunch of schemas up here. I'm kindly using Mark's user ID and password today. Mark's got a couple of tables that we set up. So HIJKLM.
It was hiding from you.
It was. I need a new pair of glasses as I move into the 21st century. So we've got tables here. So we're going to pick countries. I'm just going to use my Shift key, scroll down a little bit more, and basically pick these tables here. So we've got countries, we've got departments, we've got employees, we've got regions, we've got jobs, locations. So we've got a good selection of tables. So I'm going to say, yeah, okay, let's pick those. I'm going to double click on the employees table. We full support, as Mark knows, for disparate schema. So what I want to do here on the employees table is create a new column. So I'm going to click on transformation and say let's create a new column, call it new col, and click on our expression here to pop into the expression builder icon. So I'm going to take first name, just simply double click on it. And then under my functions, I can turn around. I've got some string functions. I've got some operators. Let's do an operator. Let's concatenate first name, put a space in here, and then concatenate it with, let's see what other functions we want to pick. Maybe we have a function to do some data enrichment. So I've got a source lookup to my source mainframe. I might want to say, hey, I've got my object ID, but I want to bring over the object description as well if I'm creating a table in third normal form, but I don't want to replicate the complete 100 billion object description table. So we could do that, or even do a target lookup. So look up that data. Maybe we've got some additional data that we want to augment from our target. Support for user-defined functions. I might want to add something like HPE voltage for PCI compliance or 256-bit triple DES encryption. We give you a set of C++ libraries and headers so you can build expressions and add them into Expression Builder. So data enrichment functions I talked about, datetime expressions, numeric strings, all those different functions. But back to my columns, maybe I want to pull some header information, maybe I want the timestamp of the transaction or the operation. But today we're going to concatenate first name, a space, and then last name. So just double click on it and it pops into Expression Builder. So I can test the expression here in Expression Builder. Let's say Bob Smith, test my expression, and we know it's successful. So some of the other things I could do is if I had a parallel load, if I had partitioned tables, I could turn around and set up multiple threads to read by partition, or set up for filtering as well if I need some subset data to load this transformation. Yes, and it notices that it's changed. So that's perfectly good. Okay, so I've got my table selection. Some of the other components are global transformations. So here I'm going to take the specific table names, which are all in uppercase, and convert them to lowercase. So we want to do that. So I'm going to save this task. Any other commentary, Mark, would you like to add with the mainframe?
Yeah, Graham, actually hit task settings there. I wanted to show you one thing in particular as it relates to the mainframe.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yep.
So whenever you have DB2 as the source, notice that one of the options down there is character substitution. Oftentimes in DB2 you get these funny characters right in the middle of a column, and because DB2 allows that, you can put binary data in the middle of columns. So sometimes that creates translation issues when we're translating from EBCDIC or Unicode from the mainframe going into an ASCII or Unicode database. And so we have a way here of adding, kind of looking for that character, that binary character, and substituting what we want it to be in the target so that the character translation executes properly. So that's just a nice little feature that we add. So anytime DB2Z is a source, that option will actually pop up in your task settings.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. I did not know that. Learn something new every day. That's pretty cool. All right, so we have our task ready to go. We have our tables set. Under my task settings for Databricks, we are going to run our full load task. I'm going to run 5 in parallel. Under change processing, we've applied changes off, but we've stored changes on. So we're going to build a base table and then what we call a change table when we do our change data capture part of this this demonstration. All right, I'm going to run it. I'm ready to run. So here we've got resume processing. I've done this demo a couple of times. Target reload would rebuild the metadata for me. And if I look under the advanced run options, I might have had a task. I might have stopped it for a reason to change it, to augment it. I may want to start a specific date and time or specific system control number or logical sequence number. As I said, rebuild the metadata or use a recovery checkpoint. So all of these features are available to the product. So I'm going to say cancel, and I'm going to say let's rebuild it. So when I hit reload target, it's going to jump from designer mode over to monitor mode. We'll be able to see the process of the task. And as Mark has pointed out, it's going to connect over VPN, connect up to the mainframe, pull all the metadata about the tables we're interested in, send that metadata over to Databricks to the metadata repository, build the table schemas for us, and then start the initial load process. So it will take a second or two to start this task, right, Mark?
And actually, one of the things that it does is it first actually uses that IFI to find a point of consistency, a transactional point of consistency in the log. So it'll see if there's any open transactions. If there is, it waits till those transactions have committed, and then it picks that LSN that is the point of consistency, and then we start full loading from that point, and it'll start capturing any changes to the tables that we're loading while they're being loaded, and then cache those and then apply them after the load finishes. So it's, I mean, Replicate's doing a lot of work under the covers here that you don't have to, deal with or worry about because Replicate's taking care of it for you.
Cool. So as our task is running, I'm going to connect to Azure Databricks. Here's a simple JDBC tool set called DB Visualizer. So when I connect up to my Databricks instance, it'll pull down all the information about the metadata and the tables that are available inside of Databricks. So I've got my database called Mainframe. So I'm going to click in here, and as you can see, we have our table definitions. So it's building those table definitions as we speak, which is pretty exciting. I can also view, if I come over to data under my Microsoft Azure portal, and here's our mainframe data. So to replicate, and we can see, yep, our 7 tables are finished. So let's take a look at employees. So if I take a look at my my employees table, here I've got my info, my column information about this table. So we're pulling the metadata from Databricks. And as you can see, we've converted everything to the table name to lowercase, but we've left the column names in uppercase. And I can click on data. So within inside this data, we're returning all the data from Databricks. And as you can see, we have basically a list of Stephen King as our first name, his phone number, and his salary for all those specific employees. But there's new call. So we added a new column which concatenated first name and last name. So that data is available. And if I go over to employees and I look at employees CT, the change table, it's currently view as I can pop over here to GH employees. We get the column information, and the Azure portal pulls down that data as well. So again, we have our Stephen King. So taking a look at this salary information, what I'm going to do is change it. So you see change data capture program, and we can increase and decrease employee salaries by $1. So I'm going to, let's pop over here again to change processing. And as you can see, here's a list of our tables, and no change data capture, no transactions have happened on the source system since our. So let me do. So it's connected up to the mainframe, and as you can see, it takes a second or two before we read that information. There, we've picked up the 107 employees.
Yeah, that's that 5-second interval. If you remember, we were kind of pulsing. So
correct.
Yeah, if we're at the end of log, then we wait 5 seconds before we go back. If we're not, we'll keep going, until we pull all the records off from the end of the logs.
So we can click on the mainframe folder, and inside the mainframe folder, we can see that we have our GH employees. If I double click on the employees, there's our CSV file. And then again, if I take a look at the employees CT, the change table, we have our change table file. To DB Visualizer, and I take a look at my, we looked at our employees table. We can take a look at the data from the employees table. And then we can see, so the salary is 24,003. And then if I look at the change table, we'll have the before image and the after image of those transactions that happened on the source. There we go. So here's our before image. If I scroll over, we can see it's for Stephen King, and his salary before was 24,003, and unfortunately it was reduced by $1 by 24,002. And the reason why we do a base table and a change table is then compose for Delta Lake will pick up those base table and the change table transactions, leveraging the Spark SQL merge command, and then create a final table for us, which mimics the source OLTP system. Also, I can pop over here again to our Microsoft Azure portal, take a look at the employees and the employees CT. It gives us a description of the change table so we know what the columns are. And once again, we can look at that data. So that's the demo, Mark. Hopefully you liked it, and let me know if there's any other components that we want to look at.
The only other thing that I'll mention is, along with from the mainframe perspective, along with being able to grab changes with DB2, we also support grabbing changes within an IMS DB database as well as vSAM with Replicate. So we install a little different component up there, than just the Replicate for to get to IMS, through the hierarchical storage and through DBDs, but and vSAM, through COBOL copybooks. But we support, those three primary mainframe databases, which pretty much covers, 90% of the mainframe data out there.
Cool. Well, thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. Thanks for joining us today. Next, we're going to go over to Mark, and Mark's going to give us a detailed description of how the components that need to be installed in the mainframe, but how it all interacts. How did we build this this wonderful demo and connect to the mainframe today?
All right, so the way, just to kind of drill down, maybe 10,000 feet, a little bit closer to what's going on in the mainframe, as it relates to getting access to DB2Z data. Here's the replicate server that Graham was showing through the replicate UI. We do use, the DB2 data server driver in order to access DB2. That's the only additional software that you need to install on the replicate server machine. And then when we issue the calls out, during the full load, again, it comes through that distributed data facility interface. We're actually accessing the data directly and bringing that back, and then pushing that, in this case, into Databricks through the the target driver. But when it comes to the CDC component, grabbing those live changes, that's where we're executing that UDTF, that user-defined table function. And it's going over and doing an external call to a load module that's running that ifkid 306 API that's accessing the log records real time. In our call here, we're actually sending in essence, a where clause with all the object IDs. So we only filter back the tables, the log records that are for the tables that we're replicating. And then we kind of queue that in some memory. That's where we're storing up that result set. And then once we have enough data and/or we've hit the end of log, then we'll actually push that result set back down to replicate server. That's where any transformation work would happen, any filtering work, any character set translation, all of those things that Graham showed you in the replicate UI designer would happen, and then of course then push that data into Databricks. So yeah, I think that's it gives you kind of a little different, at least you got a visual on what's going on in the mainframe as we're accessing DB2 data.
Cool. Thanks, Mark, and thanks everyone to listening to our podcast today. Really appreciate it. Any questions, feel free to reach out to the partner enablement team. And if there's any joint opportunities, please feel free to reach out to your local Attunity/Click account exec. And that's it from us. Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate it. It was a great morning.
Always a pleasure, Graham. Always a pleasure working with you.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.